Hello. So the question today that I want to ask is, are you finding it hard to deal with triggers? And I'm going to give you 3 tips in this short video today that will help you deal with triggers differently, okay? And it's one of the most common things that I hear about when I work with women is that they are often plagued by triggers after they've left their narcissist. And they're also sometimes called flashbacks. Generally what happens is the trigger leads to the flashback, and then that causes a traumatic reliving of whatever. So there could be dozens, if not hundreds, of physical triggers that can set you off and send you spiraling into anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, or deep sadness, or whatever. Not good places to be, not good emotions. Now it could be a song, or a movie, or a restaurant, or a particular scent, or an item of food, or a piece of clothing. Basically, just about anything can switch you back in an instant to either the wonderful phase of the relationship, the so-called golden period, or worse, to incidents of truly awful abuse that can leave you shaking and in panic at the memory. And extreme incidences of that, of course, you probably know, is generally at the PTSD or the C-PTSD stage, okay? But why are triggers so powerful? Now, the senses play a huge part in emotional triggers because everything we've learned in our entire life has been filtered in through our 5 senses. We're basically at their mercy. But what if you didn't have to be? So just imagine now, how would it feel for you if you could take triggers with a pinch of salt? How would it feel if they just didn't push your buttons anymore? And what if they just didn't have any more power over you? Well, the truth is, triggers can be disarmed, just like you'd disarm a bomb. I worked with a client recently who was thrown for a loop every time she heard a certain song, and whenever she had to visit a property where she'd spent some wonderful times with her ex. And she said that every time she went there, it was so intense, she could almost feel her ex's presence as if he was standing there. And this plunged her into a state of just deep melancholy every time, and leaving her with feelings that she just couldn't shake for days on end. Now, I actually really enjoy working with triggers with my clients because I have a lot of tools that can totally disarm the triggers. Now, a lot of them are much more intense therapy-based types, but there are some that can be very, very effective that you can just listen to now, and you can actually try them out for yourself and see which one might work for you, okay? So I've got 3 tips again for you today on 3 that might work for you. So tip number 1 is to write it down. So my absolute best advice here is to write down every possible trigger that you can think of on a list and do a bit of exposure therapy on yourself. So I'm going to give you an example of how that might work for you. So, for example, let's take the trigger of scents. Scents as in perfumed aftershave, deodorants, anything that has a nice aroma. Okay? Now, scents can be the most difficult because you can't actually remember what the smell of grass, for example, really smells like until you actually smell it. And by the time that happens, It's too late because it's already triggered the emotional response in you. If I ask you to think now of the smell of freshly brewing coffee, immediately you'll probably put yourself into a Starbucks from the last time you visited, or if you brew coffee at home, you can remember the smell in the morning of your coffee brewing, but you can't actually get the smell of it. You can remember the whole imagery around it, but not that smell. Two of my favourite smells are, I love the smell of toast. Slightly burning toast is a great smell for me. Freshly cut grass just gets me like, oh, there's just something about it. But it's a wonderful trigger for me because I love it. But I cannot here and now recall what it smells like. It's encoded in your brain. Scent is encoded in your brain differently from other memories. So that's why it can be very, very difficult to deal with a scent trigger, because they don't work typically the way our other things, our other processing mechanisms do, okay? But there is a way that you can deal with them. I'm going to share with you how to do it because I like this one. So the first thing is to make a note of what those scent triggers are, okay? I know that, oh my God, my ex's aftershave, every time I smell that, it just brings me right back, and that's really common. So if you know what aftershave he wore, or what deodorant he wore, or whatever else he would regularly smell of, here's what you're going to do, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to get yourself a bottle of, let's just say it's a bottle of scent, a bottle of aftershave. You're going to get a bottle for yourself, okay? Now the next thing is to plan to go somewhere and do something completely different that you've never done before, or you've only ever done rarely, and certainly something you've never done with your narcissist, okay? Now, you've got to try to make this something really exciting, like going to a big live West End or a Broadway show, if that's possible for you. That'd be a great way to do this, okay? If it's not, be creative. Are there any shows going on locally around you? Something that might be fun, something musical, anything like that. If not, a cinema. But make sure it's a nice, happy, fun movie that you go to see, and not, you know, Dawn of the Death or anything like that, okay? Now, what you're going to do now is, so let's say you're settled down, this event is about to begin. Now, as soon as the event begins, you open that bottle and you sniff that scent. And then you keep on sniffing it regularly throughout the show. Now afterwards, if you can go with a friend for a meal or a cup of coffee, do so and sniff that aftershave several more times, okay? Then the next day, try getting that bottle of aftershave and taking a sniff, and see if it immediately brings back the memory of this new evening out. Now very often it will. If it does, if you want to reinforce that, you just every day for the first several days or week or however long you feel you need to do it, you just go to that bottle and open it and smell it, and you bring your focus to that event that you went to that new event, okay? So keep that bottle handy and sniff it several times a day, for at least a week, okay? What happens here is that you teach your brain to associate the smell with that amazing night out, instead of the previous negative memories. Now, if the scent catches you unaware at any point in the future, the memory that should come back is the most recent association you have in your brain to that scent. So please try this one. Now, if, however, during your tryouts post-show, as in after the event, it still does trigger the narc memory that you don't want, what you do is you immediately switch that memory to the show. Stay on that show or the movie or whatever, and and recall all the highlights of that show, okay? Then remember the meal or the coffee and recall the pleasure of the evening. And basically, what you're doing here is aggressively banishing the memory that you don't want from your mind, okay? Now, if that has happened and you did recall your narc, you can amp up your exposure therapy. And you can do this by just reinforcing it at home. So you, for example, get your favourite, happiest or funniest movies or show of all time on Netflix or whatever, and do the same thing. Smell the fragrance every time your favourite bits of the film come up, okay? But just a little word of warning here is to steer well clear of romantic films, because you don't want to be watching soppy romantic stuff at the moment, because you're not in the right headspace for that, okay? So stick with comedy, happy, Disney, fun stuff, okay? Now let's talk about music and songs. Most of us can recall at least one, if not several, songs that we associate with our romantic partners. I can still recall all the songs that my first love and I listened to together, and that's over 40 years ago. Even today, the first few bars of Baker Street, Jerry Rafferty, and I am right back there in the summer of 1978 with him, okay? So if it's your song that's triggering you, here's what you're going to do. You are going to get, and there might be several, but you're going to work through them one at a time, okay? So pick the one that's the biggest for you. So you're going to get it on Spotify or YouTube, and you are going to play it until you are sick listening to it, okay? But as you listen to it, you're going to go back over the romantic times you had together when it was playing, only this time you're a spectator. You're going to see yourself as a spectator watching the two of you. And as you do that, you, the spectator, is going to bring the knowledge of who your narcissist really was into that picture from your new now perspective. And you listen to the song and watch his or her slick, lying ways as they conned you. Now, how do you feel about the song as you listen? You should feel, at the very least, a little bit of mild distaste, but focus that the distaste is on him, not the song itself, okay? Now go over these romantic events several times until the thought of those romantic moments leave you feeling cold towards him and not connected to the song in the same way, okay? Now, when the song catches you unawares in future, as it very possibly will, it should again immediately trigger this latter memory. If it doesn't, switch your mind automatically to the reality video that you created in your mind. Now, to really hammer this home, go over all the nasty things he or she did or said, and recall how that made you feel, all the while listening to your song. Now, are you starting to see how hearing this song will start sounding very differently for you in the future? Ideally, you want to get to that stage of feeling really just indifferent to the song. But that being said, and being a big music lover myself, if it is a really fabulous song and you love it, you don't want to deprive yourself of the pleasure of listening to it just because of him. So decide that you're going to like the song. Just allow yourself a brief second of distaste when you think about your narc, and then dismiss him from your mind. And you can do it. And just focus on the song for what the song is. Great tune, great lyrics, love the voice, the singer, whatever, okay? And it's actually easier than you think once you do this a couple of times. Now, you can use this technique with any trigger. You simply find a new way to view the memory you have with a new memory that you're making. A new reality show, as it were. And this can help you to beat those triggers and put you back in control of your emotional health. Okay? So, if you are, however, still struggling with triggers, in spite of trying these things, and I know they don't work for every trigger because it really depends on the level of trauma that is connected with the individual triggers, okay? But they can work for less traumatic ones, okay? So if you really are struggling with triggers and they are throwing you into a complete spin, panic attacks, anxiety, then therapy would almost certainly help you. And I work with people to help them eliminate panic attacks, PTSD, C-PTSD, and very often there's a powerful connection with triggers. So there's always that worth to bear in mind, that you could benefit from therapy. Okay, right. So I hope you find those tips helpful. Please go and give them a try and let me know if you know how you get on, if you have any success with them. And I'm Maria McMahon, and thank you again for watching, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.